Hello, welcome to Should You Skip? I read every story in Granblue to let you know if you should read them. Today we have a big one, the long-awaited collaboration between Final Fantasy and Granblue Fantasy. So, was it worth the wait? To know that, in the first part of this video, I will help you decide if you should skip this event or not. It will contain a very short non-spoilery summary of the story using elements from the introduction and the first chapter. And after that, I will tell you everything you should know before starting to read it. The second part will be a full spoiler review of the event. I will rate my personal enjoyment of the event. So without further ado, let's get into it. So, the story starts with Prish from Final Fantasy XI in her own world, and she finds a mysterious crystal on the ground. After picking it up, she gets immediately isekai'd. Now cutting to Densho and their crew, this time composed of the few Lumiel Knights. They took a mission consisting of protecting a village. They meet with Chris, the guy that hired them. He doesn't look suspicious at all, by the way. The dude gives them a crystal, leads them to a cavernous mouth, just like you would find in Vana'diel. Surprise, surprise, Chris betrays them and make MC and Lilia enter the cavernous mouth. MC gets a first glance at Lilizet in a dream world. Then MC and Lilia find themselves into another world with a red sky. Shortly after, they meet with Prish and Iroha, also from Final Fantasy, and she has lost her memory. They will then try to figure out what's going on. So okay, that's the premise. Now, what else should you know before reading? More precisely, what do you need to read from Granblue Fantasy before entering the event in order to understand it? The answer is nothing! One good thing about Granblue's collabs is, contrary to regular events, they are specifically made in order to be accessible to newcomers. So if you're a Final Fantasy XI fan and just played Granblue's main story prologue, you're good to go, you should be okay. Same thing if you're a GBF player and never heard anything about FF11. This was my case. When I read the first part of the event, I knew nothing about FF11 outside of vaguely remembering seeing some characters in the Decidia. I still understood pretty much everything without any issue because FF11 characters explain in details things concerning them, so it's easy to understand. For the second part, I did a bit of research on the game, including playing a few hours of it, just enough to see some familiar elements. Anyways, let's move on to what you can read if you want to optimize, min-max the fun of the event. Let's start with Charlotte. As one of the Lumiel Knights in the event, you should at least read her intro and skill fate episodes. Same thing with Bautarda in his SR version. As the event doesn't focus on them, there is no need to read Charlotte's Uncapped Fate episode or the Fate episodes of SSR Bautarda. The goal is to introduce you to the characters and read about how they join the crew. Next up will be the side story Little Skyfarer à la Sacrée Blumiel. Random French in the title, you love to see it. Anyway, this event is the one that introduced Sebastian, the last Lumiel Knight present in the collab. That's why if you don't want to read the whole event just to enjoy this collab better, you can just read the Fate episode of Sebastian instead. That's about it. If you don't have the characters, you can easily find their story by writing name of the character plus Fate episode on YouTube. Same thing for the side story, just searching its name should be good. This collab event should also be archived on YouTube if you miss the event period. Now let's go to what you might want to know about FF11. From my limited understanding after some research, you would need to basically play everything in the game in order to learn about every character that appears in this event. So yeah, since you'll need to play some of the latest content and expansions of the game that are aimed at high-level players, you would need to actually play the game through and through, which represents possibly a couple of hundred of hours even if you just follow the main story. If you just want to look up some cutscenes relative to the guest characters on YouTube, here's the part you should focus on. The missions that form the main story of Chain of Chromacia, the second expansion, same for Wings of the Goddess, the fourth expansion, the add-on scenario Shantoto Ascension, the trilogy of add-on focusing on Abyssea, and finally Rhapsodies of Vanadiel, the final main scenario of FF11. In addition of all that, I recommend the FF11 Clopedia Wikia. It has a breakdown of which characters are involved in which quests and missions. Some of the quest pages even have a video showing cutscenes of the said quest. Shantoto appears in a lot of quests that aren't in the expansions I named, for example. Now it's time for the name of the show to make sense. Well, almost. If you fall under one of those criteria, you should probably read the event. Let's start with the obvious. If you're a FF11 fan, you played FF11 years ago, or hell, maybe you're still playing it to this day, this event is an absolute love letter to Final Fantasy XI. Unless I'm missing something and they completely butchered one of the characters' writing, there is a very high chance of you liking every moment of that collab. And to add to that, I'm going to make something very clear. The collab targets specifically FF11 fans, not Final Fantasy fans. It's not because you like FF7, FF15, or even if you are still playing FF14 at the moment that you will appreciate or understand this event more. Second point, as a GBF fan, you like the Lumiel Knights. The Lumiel Order of Holy Knights has so little time under the spotlight that you don't want to miss anything they're involved in. Finally, if you are into elves, GBF players have been deprived of elves for way too long. So, if you have a weird pointy ears fetish, I won't judge you. This time at least. Thanks to FF11, you now have the event containing which is probably the most elves you will ever see in Granblue Fantasy. So rise up, my elf enjoyers, this is your time. This is the event you don't want to miss. Okay, then let's go to what criteria would probably be a detriment to you enjoying this event. Let's keep the obvious, pun intended. If you dislike everything I put in the previous category, you'll probably not enjoy the collab. Like, if you hate FF11, the Lumiel Knights and elves, like, what are you even doing here still? Anyway, I think you should skip if you don't care about crossovers. I know that might be obvious too, but I need to point out that this isn't the ultimate crossover to best them all. Someone that already read like 2 or 3 GBF crossovers and found them mediocre will probably still not enjoy this event. Next up, if you hate isekais. I know, most crossovers tend to be isekais. Just hear me out on this one. This collab is a double isekai. Not only the FF11 characters got isekai'd, but the GBF crew also got isekai'd in this one. If you wanted a story in the regular main Skydom, you might want to skip this one. And the best for the last, if you hate fantasy. At this point I don't know what to tell you. It's a collab between Granblue Fantasy and Final Fantasy. Just don't even bother. And with that, the first part of the video is done. We are already deep into the event, but hopefully all of that helped you choosing if you want to read this event or not. Remember, if you don't have time to read it right now, you can always skip for now and read it later in the journal. With that being said, let's go to my personal review of the event. Spoiler warning for the event and some elements of FF11 that ties into it. And here we are. I honestly don't know what to say. The event was kinda empty for the vast majority of the first part. Like, it was crammed with characters. I counted 15 named important characters, which is on the higher hand even for Granblue. In comparison, No Rain, No Rainbows, which is my personal gold standard in terms of events with a lot of characters taking the focus, had only 14 characters. And the big difference is that in that collab, most of the characters are new to the crew and to GBF players, meaning the FF11 characters have to introduce themselves in details every single time. You add to that a new setting because of isekai, and that again, a lot of time is lost on introducing basic elements. This is why I felt like nothing actually happened for a while after they got isekai'd. They basically just fight monsters, investigate and find Shantoto. Also, Abyssinian themes being not that memorable at all doesn't help with the feeling of nothing happened. Since we're still on the negatives, this event made me realize something. If they keep picking one Final Fantasy game to collab with, I might never get MC riding chocobos and fighting pampas, while Lilia compare her Bahamut to other Bahamut from the series. And when I imagined FF cross GBF collab first, that's how I wanted it to go actually. So that one might be on me, but I can't help to be a little disappointed. Now on the positives. The rhythm really picks up at chapter 5. It's immediately a crisis situation, hordes of monsters are attacking this time. The crew discovers that the big bad is actually the god that evolved into his dragon form Shiryu, which is by the way the only recurring FF monster in this event. You fight him in a space-like environment. The adventurer, the MC you play in FF11 appears for a few seconds. Things are finally going down in that epic way peculiar to JRPGs and thus Final Fantasy. It feels very cool. Maybe not on a Robomi epic clash level, but still, I actually had a lot of fun reading that part. That's why I'm really happy that I waited until part 2 dropped before making this video, because otherwise my opinion on the event might have been way more negative. That part made me add a whole point to the score actually. Still, at the point this happens, about 2/3 of the story is already done unfortunately, so it's a bit late. Other than that, I really like both Prish and Shantoto. Prish being voiced by Aya Hirano, our resident Beatrix. She also voices Brodia / Alexiel, is certainly helping. But both her Abyssinian and Vanadil versions seem quite interesting in the brash tomboy punch girl kinda way. Shantoto, well, is Shantoto. She got a big personality in that small body. She was probably the only character I remember clearly from Dissidia, and I have to say the scene where she experiments on the crew was funny as fuck. All the characters on themselves also seem pretty good, but those two made the biggest impression on me. Speaking of characters, I'm kinda happy we are seeing more of the Lumiere Knights, especially being the one chosen to interact with the FF11 characters. I'm not a big fan of the Lumiere gang, but I always like seeing underappreciated characters shine, so that's good. Finally, this collab made me realize something big. It's about how much GBF took from FF11. It's obvious that GBF took a lot of inspiration from Final Fantasy, but until now I didn't realize at what point they took from FF11 directly. Like, if you exclude the 11 and look at the races available in FF11, it's so obvious. Hume are humans, Talu are Harvins, Galka are just drafts without the horns, like Prish noticed in the event, and Mithras are Eluns. In retrospective, this really adds to the importance of this collab, especially for the side games devs. A lot of them probably played this game through and through when they were younger. Hell, not just the devs, just look at Emile Kato, Shielo Karte Seiyu, and now FF11 Maniac that had like 13k hours of play time in that game, and that was still 10 years ago. So yeah, so like I said at the beginning of the video, this collab is truly a love letter to FF11, and that may be to a fault. The event relies heavily on fan service. For example, if I'm not mistaken, it is of my understanding that the two versions of Prish never actually met in the actual FF11 game. And not that, but the fact that a lot of regular characters don't know each other and finally met in Granblue is a big gesture. But once again, since it relies on fan service so much, it might not be able to touch everybody. But in my opinion, this event is still amongst the best non-comedic collabs in GBF. It's always tough to make a good collab, but I think they nailed it with this one. I rate my personal enjoyment 7.5 out of 10. And that's it! It's over, but I intend to do something similar for every single new event, because I read every event anyway, so why not do that on the side? So if you don't want to miss it, please subscribe to my channel. If you want, ring the bell, all that YouTuber stuff, you know the deal. And bye bye, peace!